All right, and welcome to the summative assessments of module number 6, which is team management or team creation, team building, team performance. So let's look at the summative assessments. As we said, formative assessments is to show that we understand the concepts. Summative assessments is to say, in my reality, in my department, in my division, therefore we are able to implement, we are able to execute. So let's see if you are able to and you can prove your competency in managing a team. So the first summative assessment is based on the first unit standard, which is unit standard number 11473, which looked at performance measures and how to measure performance. So here we go, practical tasks. You are required to identify 2 employees and 1 team. So 2 individuals and 1 team, which is a group of individuals. And if you don't have a team that you work with or for, you're going to have to develop one with 4 members whom you intend to manage so that they can improve their performance, advance their careers, and meet the objectives of the organization. So the first thing that you have to do is look at those 2 employees and the 1 team and then do a background. So what is their job descriptions, their individual career paths, their current performance, and the areas that need improvement. Now, it's quite easy if you work directly with that team. If you don't work with that team, you might have to become hypothetical in terms of what their current performance and the areas that need improvement. But ultimately, that just reflects that you are able to understand those specific concepts. Okay, now you can get information about the employees and their teams from their supervisors or prior period performance evaluation records. So if you are able to get that, it does help you to build context. If you can't have access to that, then you're obviously going to have to ask questions and allow people to be open and honest. We're all trying to grow here. We're all trying to develop. So let's try and help each other out. All right, so now that you have a background, and so you've got to record the background of the different individuals as well as the team. Now, task number 1, using the team and the employees that you have identified, you need to set performance goals and measures in order to assist each employee to improve their performance. Work with the employees and team when setting performance goals and measures. So make sure that those set performance goals are measurable, clear, and achievable. Okay, so that's the first thing that you are going to need to do, is to make sure that the performance goals that you set up are measurable, clear, and achievable. The second thing is that we need to make sure that those performance measures, those performance goals, are linked to individual career paths, that they are linked to organizational objectives, and that the legislation of the Skills Development Act and the Employment Equity Act are brought into account in the development process. So make sure that when you have put those performance measures down, that you tell me how it is linked to the career path, how it is linked to the organizational objectives, and how it is linked to the legislative requirements of that specific position. Then we can quantify those performance measures based on quantity, quality, time, cost, and risk. So show me some of the performance measures that are linked to those specific areas. Then you need to make sure that your performance goals and measures are linked to your organization and industry practices and values. Now, you've been given a whole new set of values, so make sure that those performance measures are linked to the values. So if they're not, and they're not linked to your industry methods, well, then they obviously have to change. But I'm pretty sure that they are. You've already probably do have performance measures and KPIs and KPAs. So just show me how they link in terms of the values and the industry methods that you use. Then obtain agreement from the specific stakeholders identified in the performance goals and measures, and attach the stakeholder sign-offs in the portfolio of evidence. So once you have set those goals, make sure that everyone's read through it. If they've got comments, put the comments in. If there is an HR that needs to be involved, or a team leader that needs to be involved, or a manager that has to be involved, get them all to say, yeah, we're quite clear, we accept those as our performance measures, and that everyone signs. Again, that shows me that you had a consultation and that there is buy-in. Then stipulate the identified goals and measures in the performance contract. So performance contract is something that we took a look at, and you can use page 25 in your workbook as sort of a template of what it needs to look like and what it needs to cover. Okay, so please use that in your portfolio of evidence. Then task number 2. Using the performance goals and measures that you have set in task number 1, you need to formulate development plans to help the employees and the teams. So focus the plans on the competencies to achieve the goals of the individual, the department, and the organization. So what are the competencies that are required in order to move those performance measures up? So if you guys have a skills matrix, you can use that skills matrix and go, okay, these are the competencies that they require in order to take the step up. Or these are the competencies that we require in order to make sure that we achieve the goals and objectives of that specific department or division. And that those individuals are also aware of the objectives. Then formulate plans in a clear manner. So show me through that process that those plans were put together in a systematic and a critical way. Then define the plans in terms of specific improvement actions. So what are those action things that they need to do? What time frames you are going to give them to be able to increase their competencies, as well as the accountability. So what will happen if they miss out? What will happen if they do achieve? So put those down. Make sure that the plans are aligned with Skills Development Act, Employment Equity Act, and the individual career paths. So those are 2 of the legislations that we need to always take into account, as well as what is the future plan with that specific employee or with the team, and make sure that they are all aligned in that way. Then meet with the relevant stakeholders to obtain approval on the development plans. So the action plans in terms of increasing competencies, increasing performance measures, and then get everyone to be okay with that, negotiate, discuss it, and then also confirm it through signing off. Then implement the development plans, provide assistance to the employees and team where necessary to monitor the performance. So tell me how you're going to implement it and how you're going to provide resources and assistance and how you're going to monitor the implementation. Great. Now, task number 3 is after a period of time. So maybe take this right towards the end of when you need to submit. Identify and use valid, current, and sufficient performance evaluation techniques. So we did that in the formative side. So what are those techniques that we use to evaluate performance? So give me some idea of how you would use a specific tool or technique. Then how are you going to monitor and assess performance on an ongoing basis against performance goals that you set in task number 1? So give me specifics in terms of how you're going to monitor and assess that they are developing, that they are growing, that they are hitting the performance measures. Then how are you going to record progress and update performance records? So we spoke about performance logs or recording specific behavior or specific incidents. How are you going to record the progress and update the performance records? Okay, so the next one is you're going to analyze the performance records so that we can see if there's any variations in performance. So are they improving? Are they decreasing? Are they getting smaller? Are they getting wider? Are they hitting the mark? Are they missing the mark? So how are we going to let me know how they are doing? Then compile a plan of action where relevant. So if there's a major change between the performance measure and the current performance, show me how you're going to be able to intervene. Are you going to coach? Are you going to train? What could you do there? Then give feedback to the employees and the team where you address gaps and poor performance where you recognize good performance and that you revise performance goals. So now that you've analyzed those specific measures, you've seen what current performance is like, now you can either give some critical feedback, or you can give some positive feedback, or you can even say, well, the goals aren't realistic, or the goals are too challenging, or maybe they're not challenging enough. So tell me how then you could change the performance goals. Remember that performance feedback is always constructive, tactful, honest, and respectful. So please don't break people down when you give them the feedback. So we'll be reading through what feedback you gave and making sure that those 4 elements are always part of the feedback process. Okay, so that will be the summative for that specific unit standard. Now we look at the second unit standard, and that's really the one looking at strategy. So the first question that they're going to ask is explain strategic planning. Explain strategic planning. Now, if you go to page 5 in that specific workbook, you will see quite a bit about strategic planning. Question number 2, what would be included in an overall strategy for an organization? So think about an overall strategy. What are those things that will have to be part of that overall strategy? And so start to list them. And you can look at what your business has just gone through in terms of relooking at a strategy and what is included in that relook of a strategy. Then question number 3, what is a vision statement? So you know what a vision is. Now, what is a vision statement? And so please give me an explanation of that. Then what is a mission statement? So you know what a mission is. How is that fleshed out? It's through a mission statement. And so explain what a mission statement is. Then explain business strategy. So business strategy is how the resources are going to be allocated. How do the resources play a part in achieving that specific vision and mission? So explain business strategy. Then question number 6 is key success factors. What is key success factors? So in order to achieve successful teams or be able to be successful in objectives, you would need certain factors to be in place. So what are those key factors? So explain that a little bit more. Question number 7 give 3 reasons why strategic plans fail. So why on earth do strategies fail? And we've had some really good discussions about that. So think of 3 reasons why specific strategies don't work. Now, question number 8 says, what is a standard operating procedure? You guys have got lots of those in your organization, so just tell me what it is and how it applies to your business or team. Then what are key performance areas? Now remember, you've got KPIs and you have KPAs and you have KPOs. What is a key performance area? So you measure certain things in KPIs, but key performance area are maybe areas where you're going to have to monitor in order to make sure that if performance is good, you'll be able to achieve your objectives. And then the last one is, what are key performance objectives? Very similar to KPIs. So just explain KPOs or key performance objectives for me. All right, now you're going to do some research back in the workplace. So now that you've gone through a relook at your vision and mission and core objectives and values and strategies, now it's a perfect time to go through these questions. So identify the overall strategy of your organization. Do this by discussing the subject with your supervisor or department manager, or look for documents or websites that contain the overall strategy of your business. So tell me what that overall strategy is. Then once you have identified the overall strategy, what is the vision and mission of your organization? Then state the key success factors that apply to your organization. So what are those things that they're constantly trying to monitor and push? Then explain the long-term strategy of the business as well as the business strategy of your organization. So what is the long-term strategy and the business strategy of your business? Then discuss two advantages and disadvantages, so two advantages and two disadvantages of having an overall strategy as they apply to your organization. So give me an example of the advantages that it gives to the business and what disadvantages it gives to your specific business. Then identify and explain using examples the elements of the overall strategy that apply to your area of responsibility. So you've looked at the overall strategy, the overall business idea. How does it apply to your area of responsibility? So how does it filter down to the area that you work in? Now, it's all good and well to have these great ideas right at the top there with a fantastic strategy and communication, but if they aren't being implemented and thought of at your level, then it means absolutely nothing. Then, seeing as you are having this discussion with your supervisors and managers, keep minutes of those meetings that you're having. Keep minutes of those discussions. So attach those. Then identify and explain the objectives and activities of your own area of responsibility as they are explained in the standard operating procedure. So identify and explain the objectives and activities of your own area of responsibility as they explained in the standard operating procedure. So you are obviously responsible for some things within the business. Explain the objectives and activities that link to that. Then explain the goals, performance outcomes, outputs, KPOs, and KPAs of your area of responsibility. So there are certain things that you are responsible for. Tell me those goals, those performance outcomes, those measures, those KPAs, those KPIs that fall within your team, division, or department. And then hold a meeting with your team members to explain the role of the team in the overall strategy of the business. So you've done all this research. Now bring your team in and have a discussion, have an open discussion where you share with them the overall strategy, the vision, the mission, the KPIs, the KPAs, your goals versus the company's goals, the long term versus the short term, your area of responsibility versus the seniors' responsibilities, so that everyone is aware of how the company all joins together, that the mission and the vision is being aligned to what you do. Right. Question number 11, encourage participation of the team so that they can provide feedback about their views on the role of the team. So in this discussion that you're having, let them come up with comments and let them be part of that discussion. So attach meetings of that minutes of that meeting that you have had with your team about the goals and performance outcomes, and give me some of their feedback based on the discussion that you had. Then reflect on the mission and vision of your organization and the key success factors that you have identified. Then how do you think the mission and vision led to the key success factors? So show me that you can make the link between a mission and a vision and how they influence the key success factors. Then now that you know the mission and the vision of your organization, how does it influence the way that you do your job? So obviously the mission and the vision need to be linked to the way that you do your job or the things that are important to you. So how do those two speak? And then lastly, how does your job contribute to the key success factors of your organization? So in your specific job, what are those key success factors and how do they apply to the key success factors of the business? Then you have done your summative assessment for the second unit standard, my apologies. Then the third unit standard, summative assessment for the third unit standard, which is 242811. So now this is time and priorities and how we manage those tasks that our team has to do. So question 1, explain the purpose of a task list for yourself and for your team. So what is the purpose of a task list for yourself? What is the purpose of a task list for your team? Why should you have them? Then describe the time management matrix as a criteria for prioritizing tasks. So again, we go back to the Eisenhower matrix and give me an explanation of why we use the matrix, what are the different fields, and how we can use that to make better decisions in terms of our tasks and our time. So on page 18 of that workbook is where you can find the specifics. Then question number 3, assume your team has the task of cleaning the office. Okay, so you guys have been given a day where you have to clean the office. Identify the different resources that you would need in order to complete that specific task. So remember, it's got a link to cleaning the office. What resources do you require? Then question number 4, what is the purpose of keeping a diary? What benefits? What is the importance of keeping a diary? Okay, so that is the first 4 questions. Then section B. Okay, you are required to think of any one task that you intend to do in the future with your team at work. Okay, so think of something that in the future you'll have to do with your team. So it could be a little mini project, or it could be something added to your roles and responsibility, or it is something that would, sort of just help because things have fallen through the cracks. So think of a specific task that your team could be responsible for in the future. Then put together a task list. So the task list needs to have a name, a goal, an objective, then different activities that are involved in that specific task, the procedures or guidelines, so any SOPs that relate to those specific tasks, the resources that are required for the activity, the responsibility for each activity, so who is responsible, what is the deadline for that specific task, and the space to add an actual completion date, as well as the space for a signature. So you guys have got a template on the next page. Okay, so page number 32, there is your template. So think of the task that you guys want to take over. Put the task name, the goal, the short-term objectives, what activities, what procedures have to be followed, what resources you required, who would be responsible, where the activity needs to be performed, when is the deadline, planned deadline, versus the actual completion date. And then for those who have done the job, let them sign when they have done it. And so that's a signature of appropriate authority. Great, then task number 2. So now that you've want to take over a specific task and you've planned it and you've created a team task list and you've told everyone what they need to do, what they need in order to do it, when it needs to be done, then you need to execute. Okay, so you are now required to implement the above task list. So what has to happen is you need to allocate the task to the team members, and you need to use a meeting to communicate with the stakeholders about that specific task. So as evidence, you need to explain how the tasks were allocated and present this in a table format. So if you want to see where the table would be, it is, there is one. It is somewhere in your workbook where it would show. But it's really just to say, okay, so sweeping the floors, Johnny. Vacuuming the behind the desks, Richard. So it's just about taking a task and allocating it to a specific person. Then provide evidence of that meeting that you are having with a meeting notice, an agenda, minutes, and a meeting attendance register. So that is proof that you have had that discussion. Then you're going to create an amended task list showing the added tasks, those that were removed, and changes in task sequence. Now, planning is one thing. Executing is something totally different. So we forget about certain things. Now we're going to add those to the task list. Certain things we didn't need to do, we remove them from the task list. But also the sequence might change because the priorities change. So show me how that changed in the actual execution of that specific task. Then explain how you monitored the work of the team. So how did you make sure that they were actually doing the tasks that were expected of them at the right time, at the right standard that you have? Then write a report after the task was completed. And that report needs to have an introduction, the tasks that were completed, as well as the dates of completion, the lessons that you learned once those tasks were done, and any recommendations about in the future how to maybe do it better or to save time or save costs. Okay, so that's the report that you need to add. All right, then task number 3. You are required to write a diary to record all activities that you will do in the next day as you go back to work. The information must be recorded systematically. Use the template below. So task 3 is just to show us that you can put together a diary. So take one day in the next while before you have to submit, and then just list all the activities that you've done in time order. So maybe at 7 o'clock you arrive and you're going to do some planning. Then at 7:30 you get up, you have a cup of coffee. 8 o'clock you are going to have a team meeting, and that's until 9 o'clock. So just show that for those 2 half-hours you were in the meeting. So just again, keep record of a specific day and show me what tasks or activities you did during that specific day. Great. And then at the end of that, we will assess you based on your evidence. Then it is the last unit standard, the last summative assessment for that unit standard, which is unit standard 242821 as allocated on the front of your workbook. So question number 1 says, why is it important for team leaders to discuss and agree tasks, performance standards, and targets before putting them into action? Now, think of your role as a team leader. Why is it important to discuss and agree tasks, performance standards, and targets before putting them into action? What benefits does it have that we don't just force it down on people's heads? Okay, so there's 3 marks for that. Then what factors must a team leader consider when implementing performance plans? Now over here, if you go back to your workbook, page 28, it will give you some ideas, but obviously in real life, in practicality within your organization, might be slightly different. Then question C, list the potential challenges that can be encountered in achieving performance plans set for a team of telesales agents selling kitchen electronic products to the public. So think of challenges, but not just for your team. I want you to think of telesales agents, so people that phone you up and they're selling you kitchen electronic products. So it could be toasters and kettles and fryers and all kinds of things. They're doing that. What are some of the challenges that they might face when we are putting together performance plans? So you've maybe received those calls. Put yourself in their shoes. What challenges might they face in achieving their performance plans? Great. Now, question number 2. List 5 possible ways of monitoring team outputs against agreed plans and time allocations. Okay, so how do we do that? 5 possible ways of monitoring a team. So if we go to the top of page number 30, you will see quite a few ways that we can monitor. Okay, so that is question 2, number A. Then number B, define the team performance gap or performance variance. So what is a team performance gap, or what is a performance variance? So just define that for me. Then identify any team leader in your organization. Explain his or her role and responsibilities in your organization. So maybe think of your team leader, or if you are a team leader, explain what you are to do. Now, the wonderful thing about the theory is that the theory often shows us what has to happen in practicality. So if we go to that model on page 15 and 16 of your workbook, you will see 3 elements that any team leader has to actually deal with. Now, if we look at those 3 elements, how much of that relates to a team leader within your organization? And it also just helps you to be able to reframe it in terms of the theory. So go to that model, see what they do, and maybe then just put together their roles and responsibilities. Okay, now the practical assessment. Task number 1. Assume that you are a team leader in your organization. First thing you're going to do is identify and describe one task that you want your team to complete. So think about one task that your team maybe completes on a daily or weekly basis. Then, as a team, how are you going to organize your team workers to execute those tasks. So tell me, now you've got all these different people, different skills, different strengths, different personalities. How are you going to put your team together in order to most effectively execute that task? Then identify the roles and responsibilities that you would give to each of these team members. So list your team members, tell me how you allocate those specific tasks, and maybe even why you give those tasks to the specific team members. Then set performance standards and targets for any one of the team members. Now, you've already done this kind of exercise. You're welcome to reuse the same information, but set performance standards and targets for one of the team members in terms of that task. Then design a daily work timetable for any one team member. So you know your teams. Tell me what you would expect a specific day in that person's life to look like. So you know what you're going to hold them accountable for, what responsibilities they have. Now show me a typical day in their life so that can give them a bit of guidance in terms of what is expected. So that's number 5. And you might need to make certain assumptions based on that. Now, as a follow-up to task number 1, you are going to tell me how you are going to monitor your team's outputs against the set performance standards. Okay? So explain how you are going to monitor team outputs against the set performance standards. So you've set some standards. You now need to monitor that they are able to achieve at that level. And on page number 30 in your workbook, they'll give you some ideas of how you can monitor against performance standards. Now, what are some of the reasons that your team members might fail to meet their performance targets? Okay, so now you know in your organization there's specific reasons why you can't hit your KPIs. So list a couple of those reasons and then also put together possible solutions. So maybe there's a stock shortage. What could you do about it? Why else could you not hit those specific performance standards? And what are the possible solutions to those situations? And then identify possible variances that might occur between the planned output and the actual output. And what corrective action would you take? So a little bit different. So some of the reasons why you would not be able to perform at the right level. But if you have slight deviations, what could you do to make sure that those deviations are not as dramatic as what they possibly could be? And again, you might need to make certain assumptions based on what your answers are. And then we would assess you on unit standard number 4. And then, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the summative assessment. So if you have any questions, you can contact me directly, or we can bring it up at the next session. But ultimately, I want you guys to be successful. So please, rather ask sooner rather than later. So good luck with your summative assessment, and good luck putting all of these new concepts, ideas, and topics that we have discussed, putting them in place and re-looking at the way that you do work and business. Okay, good luck. Chat soon.